Our view is looking much better, and it's more closely linked to the designs that we had originally. So our app is making a ton of progress. However, we can't do much with it right now. Actually, we can't do anything with it right now. The point of our app is that you can interact with it. In this module, we're going to add some interactions and show you how you can get your cards to interact with your touch. Before we dive right into the code, let's think a little bit about how we actually want our app to be interacted with. We have a stack of cards on our screen, and we want our user to be able to put their finger on the top card and slowly or quickly drag it around the screen. As they're dragging it left and right, they will get some type of feedback that will show them that dragging it left and dragging it right will do something. In this case, marking their card true or false. There's going to be some type of threshold on our screen. So if the user is still kind of within the bounds of this threshold, then the card should just snap back to the center. And if the user is outside this threshold, either on the far left or the far right side, it should swipe the card off and mark the answer for the card. Once the card is swiped off, then that card is removed from the list, and you can actually then start interacting with the card below it. And you'll keep going until there's no cards left in your stack. The great thing about this is Apple has provided us a ton of great mechanisms for managing touch within our UI kit and our UI view. There's a few different ways that you can manage touch within your app, and I'm going to show you one of those ways. This is called a gesture recognizer. A gesture is a special class by Apple that assists in helping you manage different specific touch actions. There are two requirements for a gesture recognizer: a target and an action. A target can be a specific view, a controller, or any other object that you want to assign this recognizer to. The action is a function that you define that will be ran whenever that specific gesture is performed. We can create this gesture recognizer in code similar to how we created our views. I want to go back to the storyboard though, because I think you guys can get a little bit more practice there. So let's get right to it. If we go back into our storyboard, we'll see the view controller that we created initially with our background. Let's go down here and make sure that we have our views over here. And if you start typing gesture, you'll notice a bunch of different gesture recognizers pop up. Let's just go through a couple of these. We have the tap gesture, which recognizes tap gestures, including a double tap and a multiple tap. That doesn't seem like what we want. Pinch gesture recognizer recognizes pinch gestures. That sounds like it would be useful if you're trying to zoom in on a photo or something, but it doesn't seem like what we want here. We have a rotation, no. Swipe, recognizes swipe features, that's cool. Let's see. Pan gesture recognizer. This one looks like a good one. Recognizes pan or dragging gestures. This seems exactly like what we want for our cards because we want to drag them around. So if I expand my view controller scene here and just expand out what I have here, and I just drag it, and what I want to do is I want to drag it into my view. I don't want to drag it right on top of the storyboard because it's going to drag right on top of the background. I'd rather just have it be on the root view, so I recommend doing it that way. And the way you can double check to make sure everything's good is if you right click this gesture recognizer, you'll see a couple of options here. You'll see this referencing outlet collections, and you'll see that our recognizer is linked to our view. That's exactly what we want there. If you don't see that, you might have dragged it a little off from the view. You can just go ahead and click the plus button that should be to the side there, and then drag it over and hover over the view and click that. One thing we still need to do is we still need to apply the action for our gesture. To apply the action, we're just going to go, and if you hold Option and click on the view controller, this will open up the view controller in a secondary panel. And we're just going to hide this to give you more space to see. And we can also hide this one as well. Now, I can click on my pan gesture recognizer, and let's scroll down to where we're still inside the class, so above this curly brace, but in its own area. So if we control and click, you'll see that we can drag this over, and you'll see it says insert outlet action or outlet collection. So if I click that, and I switch this over to an action, again, what I said was we needed an action. And by creating this connection as an action, we're pretty much creating a function that will be run whenever this gesture is activated or the panning is activated. So the name is going to be the name of the function. We want something that we can recognize. So I'm going to call this pan card views. And down here is the type that's coming through. And you'll see that it says any. There's a specific type that's called any. I don't want to delve too much into that, but if you drag down into here, you'll see that we can select it as a UI pan gesture recognizer. What this basically does is the object that's coming through in our function, or the parameter, is going to be a pan gesture recognizer. This is perfect because this object has exactly what we need to look at things like the coordinates, the position, the translation, kind of where our finger is on the screen and how much it's panning. So we're going to want to do that. And if you hit connect, you'll notice that we created an IB action function called pan card views. And you'll notice that the sender parameter here is a UI pan gesture recognizer. So let's paint a little picture about what is actually going to happen. When you or the user starts dragging your finger on the app screen, it's going to trigger your gesture. And it's only going to trigger when the panning is actually happening. So if you tap, it's not necessarily going to trigger. Once you begin panning, your function or your action that you created is going to be run multiple times as you're panning along. So it's not just going to happen once, it's going to happen as you're moving your finger along the screen. This is great because then we can take the coordinates and apply that to our card to allow our card to move with our finger. The next step is we're going to need to grab the coordinates from our finger as we're dragging along the screen and applying that to our card. Let's take a look and see how we can even get that data in the first place. Before I do any specific things with setting our cards, let's see how this function is actually working. So I can close this to get back here and open up our file browser again, and let's go into the view controller once again. Now, if you're unfamiliar with certain classes that Apple provides you, a great thing to do is to check the documentation. So I can Alt and click this UI pan gesture recognizer, and it will pull up a brief description if you haven't already seen this. So if I click this class reference, it'll open up documentation that Apple provides us that allows us to easily see what is accessible and what we can use. This can be a little daunting at first, but I do recommend just trying to go through and reading different variables and different functions that Apple provides you. It will be a really great resource in the end, and that's how I personally, I don't just know everything. I have to do a little bit of research. I'm going to explain a lot of this to you though, so if you want to do this in your free time, feel free, but we'll go ahead and go through the code ourselves. So if I look at the documentation, I'll notice that there is a specific function called translation. And if you read it, it says the translation of the pan gesture in the coordinate system of a specified view. This seems about what we want because we do want the translation, which is as you're moving your finger from where to where is it going. So right here, I'm going to store this in a variable that we have. So I can say let translation equal sender dot, and if I start typing translation, I can hit enter. And right here, it's requiring a specific view. And what we want is we want the root view of our view controller because that is the entirety of our screen. So if I type self.view, and here we can print translation, this will just allow us to see what is happening. We're not doing anything specific yet. And if I run it in the simulator, now the mouse press can be very similar to your finger gesture, and in this case we can use the simulator and click through on our screen, similar to if you have your phone and you just start dragging your finger around on the phone. All right, so before I start dragging around in the screen, I want to make sure that the console is open. So again, to make sure that's open, you click this to pull up the bottom. And again, this bottom right part right here, this is going to be the console. So if I go back into this and I just start dragging around, you'll notice that a bunch of numbers are getting printed out. If I let go and I start dragging again, you'll notice it resets. So you'll notice that this function isn't just getting called once, it's getting called a bunch of times as I'm dragging my finger around. And again, this is the translation. So this isn't necessarily the point or coordinates on the screen, it's just the amount that we moved from our original point. This is the exact data we need to apply it to our card in order to get our card to move along with our movement. We can use this data to move our cards around, but one thing that I know, and if we go back into the code, I'll show you, you'll notice that we added the cards to its subview here. We initially created this card view, but we're not storing the cards yet. We can store our cards by creating an array, and this array is going to have all our card views in it, and as we're creating them, we can add this in. That way, in our pan function, we can reference our local variable that we created, or the array, and pull the card and do the actions that we need to. To do this, let's go back all the way to where the top of our view controller. And just underneath here, I'm going to create a local variable. So this is going to be var card views. And this is going to be a type of statement card views. So we're defining this as an array of statement card views. And up here, I'm just going to make this an empty array. So this is just going to have nothing in it at the beginning. We can go to where we're creating the cards, and as we're creating them, we can add this to our array. So if you go here in the view did load, where we're going through the statements and we're creating our card view, right here, I can say self.cardViews.append card view. So arrays have a special function known as append, which simply adds a new item into the array itself. So if we go here, we are now, for every card we're creating, we're now adding this to a local variable. Let's look at the order of our card views real quick. If we go back into our app, we'll notice that the top card is Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker are twins. And if you look at our statements here, you'll notice that that is the last item in our array. Why is it the last one? Well, as we're going through our array at the very beginning, but we're adding the cards similar to if you were going with a stack of cards and you were placing them down. The last one is obviously going to be at the top. So what we want to do is we want to go back through this array from the end and then go back to the beginning. This can be done with the array using the last property, which will just give us the last item in our array. Let's go back in the action and grab the card that we need so that we can adjust the position of that card to our finger coordinates. If I go back down to pan card views and I type let card view equals self.cardViews.last, this will give us the last item in our array. If you look at the what the last returns, you'll notice that it returns a statement card view optional. Again, if our array is empty, this last will actually give us nil. So we want to account for this. If the cards are empty or if the cards array is empty, we want to make sure we can handle this, because if the user goes through all the cards, there should be none left, right? A great way that Swift solves this is we can wrap this in a conditional. So if I go back here and type if let self.cards equals last, We have our card view now, and we have the translation. So let's think real quick about how we want this to move. Previously, we talked about using the center property to center our card on our screen. This is actually another great property we can utilize with our translation. So as we're moving this, we can append that translation to our center to move the card around. So going back into our code, I can get rid of this print, at least for now. And this translation, we want to move it into the conditional block here, because we only care about the translation if we actually still have cards left. Now I can create a new point, which will pretty much be the center of our card view, adding on that translation. Let new card view center equals, and again, I want to create a CG point. And if I click it, and I want to utilize the one with the CG float, so we can click 3 down and hit enter. And here, I'm just going to want to add the card view center, so I can say card view dot center dot x plus the translation dot x. Same thing with the y, card view dot center dot y plus translation dot y. So we got our new center point. Now we just need to actually set our card view center to this new point. Card view dot center equals new card view center. So let's run this real quick and see if we get what we want. Okay. If we start dragging around, whoa, you'll see that it moved my card, but it just flew off the screen. Let's think about this really quick. If we go back into our code and let's print this translation again, and we run it again. We've got some movement, but it's not aligning with our cursor, or if you're using the phone, your finger. So if I try this one more time and I start moving this, you'll notice it's super sensitive. And if we look at our translation printout, you'll notice that on every frame that it's moving, it's adding up. So 4.5, 5.5, 6. And if you think about adding this to our center, that's actually incorrect. We don't want to continually add each individual piece. We only want to add the difference for that because we're already calculating the previous frame's movement in. When we add the center, the way we did here, we want our translation to be zeroed out again, so that on the next movement, it just adds the difference. So I can go in here, and I just need to type sender.setTranslation, which if you look at the function, it says sets the translation value in the coordinate system. And it's asking for a CG point. The great thing here is I can just type CG point.0, which represents 0, 0. And for our view, I just need to type self.view. Let's try this again. Okay. Now, when I try to move my card, you'll notice that it's moving with my finger now. This is really cool. We've actually added some interaction with not a lot of code. We've only added a few things here and there. This is really, really cool. You will notice though, when I let go, that it doesn't spring back to the center like we wanted it to. And when we try to swipe it off, nothing happens. So it's just moving with our finger, but it's not doing anything else. The next module is going to go into detail with centering your card and doing some of the animations that we wanted when our card is in certain places.